So my talk is called, if we can get it up on the screen, oh shoot, there's a new accessibility law and I'm not ready. My name is Emma Dawson and I am a front-end developer and accessibility specialist from Stockholm in Sweden. And I work as a consultant at a company called Access Lab. And we help different companies around Europe to improve their accessibility. So I'm currently working with a very large e-commerce site to help them at the moment. My talk is going to start off talking about accessibility laws, but at the end of the day, it's about real people. So I want us all to always to remember that. On the screen behind me, you can see two images. The top one is of an assistive device called a refreshable braille display, and this converts text on the screen to braille that people who are blind can read. And underneath is an image of a person in a wheelchair that can't use their hands, but they can still use a computer through the use of joysticks and buttons that they can press with their head, their chin, their different parts of their face. And these are just two examples of different assistive devices that exist to help people access the web and computers. So what we'll cover today is, first, why should we make things accessible at all? Then we're going to go into an overview of the new laws and the standards that exist around those laws. But I actually don't want to dwell too long on those. I want to actually give you some practical examples of code that you can take away this week and start implementing, and then what you can do with that and go further. So why should we care? Well, statistics show that over 101 million people in Europe, and that's over 1.3 billion people worldwide, and I find these numbers are just kind of staggering, have a significant disability that affects their everyday life. And as we grow older, people acquire disabilities, and so 1 in 2, over 50% of people over the age of 65 have a disability. So that means that probably in all of our lifetimes, we're either going to acquire a disability ourselves, or someone that we know and love is going to acquire a disability. So if you imagine that tomorrow you left this conference and something happened, you had an accident, and you gain a disability, you don't want to suddenly not be able to do your banking online, or be able to shop things online anymore, or even gaming and that kind of thing. So making the web and all the things around it as accessible as possible is really important for our everyday lives. And actually, although many people with disabilities do live in poverty, disabled people have a massive buying power. The Valuable 500 did a survey a couple of years ago, and it showed that disabled people had a buying power of over $8 trillion. Again, that's a number that kind of blows my mind. I can't quite get my head around it. And it also showed that if you include their friends and family in that number, the number rises to $13 trillion. And that's a lot of money that companies are just leaving on the table by ignoring accessibility and not making their websites accessible in the first place. But unfortunately, they are just leaving that money on the table. And they don't care, and because of that, we need certain laws and regulations in place to kind of force companies to do the thing that they should be doing already. So let's go and have a look at the legal timeline. It started in 2006 with a worldwide, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and this was like a worldwide thing that was signed or ratified by nearly every country in the world. And it's a very generic law. It basically says that people with disabilities shouldn't be discriminated against. And although it's very generic, it paved the way for much more specific laws. And so if we look at the laws within the EU, in 2021, we got the EU Web Accessibility Directive, and this is a law that focuses on public services. So if you already work within public services, you might know that you need to make those websites accessible. You need to have an accessibility statement and that kind of thing. And then this year, we're also getting the European Accessibility Act, and this comes into force in June, which is why it's really important that if you haven't already started focusing on accessibility, that you start to do it now, so that you are preparing yourself and getting ready. Because many of the countries across Europe will start to monitor accessibility after June this year. And the European Accessibility Act builds on the Web Accessibility Directive by spreading it further to private companies. So this includes e-commerce companies, banking, e-books, transport, all the kind of things that you need to be able to live your everyday life. And what comes next? Well, hopefully an accessibility revolution, but we don't know. And I think this is a really exciting time, but obviously it does come with some challenges as well. And just as a brief overview then, we have the Web Accessibility Directive for public service, we have the European Accessibility Act for private products and services, and they together rely on a standard which has a fantastic name, EN 301549. Try and say that fast 5 times. And that is a standard that looks at the accessibility requirements for ICT products and services. That's in Europe, we use European standards, but it actually basically falls back on a global standard from the W3C, which is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And for web, nearly every country uses this and says that their website should be accessible to what's called level A and AA. And with just a few exceptions or additions, the standard in Europe, the EN standard, basically copy pastes the WCAG, as I'll call it from now on. But the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines isn't super easy to get your head around at first glance. Here we've copy pasted the entire text into a Word document, done a print preview, and then zoomed out. And you just get 98 pages of solid text. It's not super easy to read. There's a lot of legal jargon in there because it is designed as a standard to back up legal requirements. And unfortunately, that can scare a lot of people off. However, that doesn't mean that I'm going to say never go and read the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but I wouldn't suggest it as the place to start. Definitely go and look into it at some point in your accessibility journey. But where should you start then instead? If I'm not going to say go and read the WCAG from front to back, which took me about 4 or 5 months to do. It's tough work. So where should you start instead? Have a think instead about how your website works for different groups of people. So think about these questions. How would the website work for a person that can't use a mouse? How would it work for someone that can't see the screen and relies on a screen reader to read everything up for them? Or for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing? How would your website work, especially if it's got a lot of video, so that you don't trigger epileptic seizures when someone's watching your site? And how will you make it easy to understand for people with cognitive impairments or learning difficulties? And like we said before, 1 in 2 people over the age of 65 has a disability. So how are we making our websites work for elderly people, and the fact that elderly people often have less technical skills as well? What are we doing for them? So I think a great place to start is actually to go to, there's a link on the screen which is WAI/fundamentals on the W3 website, and that is the Web Accessibility Initiative, where they explain how different groups of people use the internet and the assistive devices that they can use. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on how people that use a keyboard and people that use something called a screen reader use the web, and how we can make it more accessible for them. But I do want you to kind of think about all of these different groups of people. And before I go any further, I know most of you in the room are probably developers, but it is a joint effort. It's not all down to you. Like if a designer gives you an inaccessible design with really bad color contrast, there's nothing you can do that's going to make that more accessible apart from go back to the designer and ask them to redo it. You're also going to need your product owners to be on board. And although a lot of accessibility isn't more costly than doing it in an inaccessible way, some of it does take more time and will require like that someone says, yes, okay, go ahead and we'll give you the extra money that it costs to make it accessible in the beginning. But today I'm going to focus mostly on how we as developers can make our sites more accessible by looking at how we improve code. So I want to look at these 6 different ways. Hopefully we've got time to get through them all. If not, then I will give the link for my presentation to anybody that wants it at the end. Just come up and ask me. I'll be here tomorrow as well. But I wanted to start by looking at semantic HTML, then look at event handlers. Then we're going to look at the disclosure pattern, search results and error messages, and then we'll talk about testing. So although this is a JavaScript conference, the accessibility of any website does consist of good HTML, good CSS, and good JavaScript. And so the basis of everything is that everything is semantic. So we'll start with semantic HTML. And one of the issues a lot of times, especially with JavaScript frameworks, is that they can abstract the semantics away so that we don't know what's underneath our components. So on the screen, I've got probably a React app, which looks like it's got a custom header, a custom navigation, a couple of sections, and a footer. But if we dive into all of these components, we might actually find that underneath, all of them are made of divs. And unfortunately, divs are called generic components, and they are not communicated to screen readers in any way. So if a screen reader user came onto a site, and like many of us, if we were going to a site and looking for, say, contact information, we know often that contact information is in a footer. So we, as being able to see, can scroll down to the footer and find that contact information pretty quickly. But if everything here is a div, a screen reader user can't do that in the same way. If, however, we change out these divs and actually use the semantic elements underneath, so our custom header is made of a header, and our navigation is made of a nav, our footer is made of a footer, screen readers have ways to communicate this to screen reader users, and they can then they have a lot of short keys that they can use on their keyboards, so they could go straight to the footer landmark and find the same information instead of having to go through the entire site. So really great if you can add landmark elements and even other like semantic HTML to your site, because it just makes it easier for screen reader users to find the elements quickly. Okay, and then semantics is also related to JavaScript in the sense that the on-click method specifically is something that is influenced by the semantic HTML that we choose to use. And you would be amazed that this actually still happens, but div role equals button with an on-click function is not the same as button with an on-click function. And I actually saw this example with a div with an on-click in the keynote this morning. And I see this regularly in the websites that I work with. And the thing here is that although we add role of button to the div, it doesn't then add all of the expected behavior that the browser knows to add to a button which is already interactive. So why does this happen? Well, quite often developers will do this because they don't like the CSS that is inherent in the browser, and I don't blame them. Buttons in the browser look terrible, but they do this often just to avoid doing a CSS reset. The issue with doing this, though, is adding on-clicks to divs that are not non-interactive will only work when you click them. To make it interactive, first we need to make it keyboard interactive. We need to add it into the tab order so you can reach it with the tab key by adding a tab index of -1. And we would then have to add the extra key up events for the enter and the spacebar in order to make it work with those keys. And this is actually a ton more code than it ever is to do a CSS reset. Whereas if we now just have the same button that says buy now, but we swap it out for a button, we need to reset the CSS. We need to make it look nice, but it will automatically work with a keyboard, with screen readers, and with other assistive technologies. So this is something that's really important to remember. Okay, we'll move on to disclosure pattern. And this sometimes goes by several different names. We've got like pop-ups, drop-downs, menus, drop-down menus, pop-up menus, all sorts of different things. But it's a button that discloses something more on the page. It's really nice for people that use the website that can see it because it kind of hides things away and makes things look clean and tidy. And you can just press the button and it will pop up and give you extra things to choose. However, for keyboard users, we often see issues with accessible hiding of the drop-down of the disclosure, and the problem is that often people will just move the whole thing off the page with like a position in CSS, but that will still make it that you can get to it with a keyboard and with a screen reader, and it can be then confusing if the focus suddenly disappears from the screen and you don't know where it is. So it's really important that we hide things properly with like display none, or we use the hidden attribute to toggle on and off with JavaScript. And then again, when we open the disclosure, we actually want to be able to get into it with our tab keys. And I was just looking at a site earlier this week where I could open the disclosure no problem with the enter key, but as soon as I tried to tab into it, I just couldn't get there. So really important that once it's on the screen that you can also tab into it, and that the disclosure itself doesn't exist like right at the end of the DOM or right at the beginning or somewhere else that is not accessible. It's also really nice if you can close it with the escape key. And also if I open this and tab through all of the options and then like, nah, I'm not interested in any of those. And if I tab away from the last element, it should also close automatically so that I don't get stuck, like I can't see where I am underneath it. But for screen reader users, they also need to know what this button is called. And by having an icon, we often have an issue that, the icon will have like just a really random name like cog.jpg, and it might not really tell us what this button does. And they also need feedback when we open and close the button, and that's what we're going to add with JavaScript. So here we have on the screen just some simple code. We have the button, we give it an accessible name with aria label equals settings, and we have a div, and this is fine to be a div, it doesn't need to be anything more semantic. And we add a class called hidden on this, so we're going to toggle our hidden class here to make it visible or not visible. And we query the button, and because it is an actual button, when we add our click event, we are going to get that keyboard event as well, just for free. And then we're going to add to the actual button. Some people make the mistake that they think that they're going to add this to the disclosure itself because it feels that that's more logical. But to the button, we're going to add aria expanded equals false. And that is going to be what we toggle with JavaScript as well to give feedback to a screen reader user. And then in our open settings and our close settings buttons, we literally just set aria expanded to true and remove the hidden attribute, or we set it to false and we add the hidden attribute back in. And then we toggle backwards and forwards depending on which one is true or false. And how does this sound to a screen reader user? Well, I have a little bit of a technical glitch with my computer, and so the sound is not working, so I'm going to try and do some audio description here. You're going to see a short video, and it does actually have on the screen a little square saying what the screen reader is reading out, so you can also read that if you can see it. But on the screen here, So I'm going to tab to the theme button, and when I press it, it says that it's expanded, and when I close it again, it says that it's collapsed. I'll just play that one more time because it was pretty quick, so that you can see. And that collapsed expanded is the screen reader giving that little bit of extra information that there is a disclosure visible on the page. And that's all that's needed to make an accessible disclosure. Okay, let's move on to search results. So now I have on the screen a picture of the Tesco website, which is a UK grocery store. And I've just done a random search for A, B, C, D, E, F, because I knew that that wouldn't give me anything. And visibly, we can see on the screen that it says no matches. And then if I do something that I know will be there, I search for chocolate because I like chocolate. It shows me the results for chocolate. It shows me how many results there are. And I get a long list of lots of different products. But for a screen reader user, they get this. So we search again for A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Nice and slow here. And then I search for it, but I never get any response that there are no matches. So I need to make sure that even screen reader users are hearing that there are no matches or that there are matches as well. So how do we do that? Well, we start with an empty element on the page. In this case, I've chosen a paragraph tag because I think that's the most relevant here. And I'm going to add to it role equals alert. And this is going to be in the page right from the beginning. It's important that it's in the DOM from the page load because some screen readers can be a little bit finicky with role of alert if they're not there from the beginning. And what I want to do is I want to add a very short message into my alert. I absolutely do not want to add the entire search results with all the product cards because that's just going to be overwhelming to listen to. But I want to add short messages like no matches found or showing 1 to 25 of however many items there are. And again, super simple. I just grab the paragraph with the query selector and then I inject my text with inner text in this case. And that's then going to get read out to a screen reader user as soon as that text gets inserted inside this paragraph tag. Now here I did have an example of a really nice example of the gov.uk website where I'm going to search for driving license, and even before I press enter, they're already going to tell me that there are 5 results that I can select from in a drop-down menu. So here I search, the drop-down menu appears, and then it says there are 5 search suggestions available because they have added this role of alert to the search input. Now I will say be careful with the role of alert. It's easy to go away and be like, oh yeah, this is fantastic. I'm going to tell people about everything. But it can be problematic. It can, like if you have more than one on a page, they all try and go off at once and you're going to get into issues. And we'll go over that a little bit more when we look at error messages now. So we can handle error messages in the same way. Here's another example from the Autoglass website, which is the UK version of Carglass. And you enter your registration number. And again, I'm entering a registration number that doesn't exist. And as soon as I click the button, a message pops up on the screen telling me that they've not been able to identify this vehicle, but the screen reader user does not get any feedback about this either. Again, a pretty simple solution. We can add role of alert to the error message element. But we can also use something called aria invalid when it comes to input fields. So on the input field, when the onValidate function runs, I'm going to add aria invalid true, and then I'm going to inject my error message as well. And this aria invalid true becomes important in case either the user doesn't hear the error message. When they go back to the input, they will hear that there is something wrong with the input. But it also becomes important when there's more than one issue on the page. And here is an example Shame you can't hear it, but and this is also in Swedish. This is from the Carglass Sweden website, which I helped to fix, where we see the same example as before, but this time when an error occurs, the user does get feedback, and you see the focus move to the error message and then be read out. So if you can see at the bottom, I'm entering a registration number that I know doesn't exist. I click the button, the error pops up, and it's also read out by the screen reader, so they get automatic feedback. But again, I said there are problems with this role of alert. And that happens when you've got several errors on your screen. So in this case, we have 3 errors on the screen, but we can use our ARIA invalid to help us here. So what we want to do instead is, as soon as we click that submit button, that we add ARIA invalid with JavaScript to every input error on the page. And then we're going to have an array of inputs with ARIA invalid on them, and we choose the first one, and we move with .focus method to the first error in our form. The screen reader user will then hear that that there is an error there, and then they can fix it, and then they will tab to the next input element, and hopefully they will also hear that that is invalid. If they do, for whatever reason, tab all the way to the submit button again and re-trigger the form, they will then, this ARIA invalid array will be re-triggered, and they will then move focus to the next element that is problematic. And this is a way to deal with several error messages, especially if your designers don't want to add like an error summary on the page, which I've come to understand that many designers unfortunately don't want to do. Okay, so let's go into testing before we wrap up. In the whole software developer lifecycle, we really should be focusing on people with disabilities from the start and adding in testing where we can. So right when we're planning and thinking about requirements for a new product or service, we should be adding people with disabilities into the research stages. We should be testing with prototypes as much as we can. Then in the design stage, continued user testing as much as possible, but you can also add automated testing for things like color contrast and are touch targets big enough and that kind of thing. And then in the coding and the testing stages, we need to be thinking of automated testing and manual testing with a keyboard, manual testing with a screen reader. And then all the time when we're building things, doing usability testing, which should then show maybe new issues that we can then start the cycle all over again. Some testing tools that you can use to make this easier for you to achieve. Nearly all of us probably use ESLint in some form in our code base. ESLint has a plugin called JSX A11Y. If you add that into your code base, it will automatically highlight things if you've forgotten an alt attribute on your images, for example. It will pick that up even before you've pushed your code up to GitHub or wherever you push your code to. It doesn't pick up everything. All kind of automatic tools pick up roughly 30 to 40% of issues. You can also add unit tests and end-to-end tests. So things like Jest, Playwright, Cypress, they all have plugins such as Axe Core that you can add into your testing suite, and that will automatically then run these automatic tests when you run your unit tests or your end-to-end tests, and again pick up issues that are usually fairly fixable. And then if you don't want to add that into your code, there are also browser extensions. Microsoft Accessibility Insights or the Axe Dev tools are 2 that I use frequently, which are really nice. And then once you're done with automatic tools, you really need to be testing with your keyboard. Can you tab through everything in a logical order? With every button or link that you reach, can you activate it with the enter key? With buttons, can you activate them as well with the space key? Radio buttons, can you select them with the space key? So that is something that you should be doing. And then I do think that it's a good idea to just learn at least the basics of how a screen reader works. For Windows, you can download one called NVDA for free, and on Mac, there is one inbuilt called VoiceOver. So you just have to learn how to turn it on and run like through some tutorials and learn the basics. You don't need to be a technical wizard at screen reader, but you do really should get to grips with how it works so you can be testing your components and things as you're making them. And then something that trumps all of these manual and automatic tools is usability testing. And I know as developers that's often something that we don't have much say in, but if you can convince your designers to do usability testing with people with disabilities, it's just fantastic. You will learn so much by doing usability testing. And so today we have actually managed to get through everything: semantic HTML, event handlers, disclosures, search results, error messages, and testing. And I know that it can be overwhelming. The deadline is June, but obviously like this will carry on after that as well. But what I want you to take away from today is choose just one. Go back to your day job next week and see if you can implement one thing that I've talked about today. But then once you've done that one thing, do another thing. And then once you've done that other thing, then you keep going. And the next time you need to build a component from scratch, instead of going back to one that you've built before, do a bit of research and think, okay, have I built it accessibly before, or do I need to change something? So that is what I want you to think about. So as I said, the deadline for the European Accessibility Act is June the 28th this year, but it's a step-by-step journey. Start today, keep making progress forwards, and after that date, still keep making progress forwards. So I want to thank you so much for coming and listening to my talk. Here's the QR code if you have any feedback and if you have any questions. I'm Emma Dawson Dev on most of the socials, and if you want access to the slides, just email me on emma@accesslab.com and I will send you the link to get access. Thank you.